Hello, this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network every Thursday at 1 p.m. And you could also find me on the Conscious Resistance Network and Conscious Resistance YouTube channel. So today we have Richard Heathen coming in from Canada, who is the founder of the Liberty Machine News website. He's a filmmaker, activist, and he's producing a series called The Hidden Influence, and the first one was released recently, The Rise of Collectivism. So, Richard, so tell us, when we start, tell us a little bit about how you, got into liberty and how you became an anarchist.
Well, first of all, I don't like the term anarchist because I don't think because it has so many connotations with the far left. The real anarchists, the traditional anarchists are leftists. I prefer to refer to myself as either an anarcho-capitalist or libertarian. Usually a libertarian, but also I sometimes like to wear the mantle anti-statist. But how I became involved with liberty was, I've kind of through my childhood, my parents had some unconventional friends, and I was exposed to other viewpoints, I guess what some people might call conspiratorial ideas. And so that those ideas kind of helped shape who I am. And then after 9/11, I kind of seen that, well, something was happening, right? We were witnessing a ramp up of authoritarianism in Western society. And so that kind of was the start of my path. And then fast forward years later, Ron Paul's 2008 campaign is what really solidified the idea of liberty for me. It basically, because I was growing up in Canada, we pretty much are bombarded with a left of center viewpoint. There are certain viewpoints in Canada which are basically default. Pretty much anyone who hasn't thought about or questioned the status quo is going to be basically center left. They're going to believe in things like socialized medicine, that is a good thing. Like, in Canada, socialized medicine is almost like a holy grail. They look at the American or any sort of privatized idea of medicine as something horrible because, oh my God, you might have to pay for your own medicine when you're sick. There's no understanding of economics. There's no understanding of basically how the system works and why it is flawed. Anyway, so yeah, Ron Paul helped me kind of shed my statist tendencies, my left of center tendencies, and then I kind of went deeper down the rabbit hole, discovered Murray Rothbard, and then I decided that I needed to do something, which is why I created LibertyMachineNews.com. And Alex Jones actually played a fairly strong influence in helping shape my ideas. It's interesting. The reason I made the film Hidden Influence was I was listening to him one day, and he basically challenged his viewers, like, "Oh, you want to be Alex Jones? You want to be Alex Jones? Well, save up some money and make a movie. You could be." Basically, I'm like, all right, yeah, I can do that, sure. And so basically, that's what I've been doing ever since. If I'm wondering if Alex Jones didn't issue that challenge to his listeners, if I would have been making this film.
Wow, very nice. That's a good influence from Alex Jones. Yeah, I also was into Alex Jones for a while. I went through I basically ascribe him to the doom porn, sector of the activism. Is like, he's good, but then again, he just sounds so like his barking voice, and he's like sounds pessimistic and all about the collapse, and here are your survival supplies, and you have to buy them from me.
Well, to be fair though, Alex Jones is probably a better capitalist than 9 out of 10 anarcho-capitalists I see out there.
Very true.
He's able to create a product which has been successful and meets market demand. Do I agree with everything he says? No, of course I don't. But I also think that it's really hip to hate on Alex Jones and to poo-poo him. Well, I'm sorry, but Alex Jones has created probably more anarcho-capitalists and brought more people to liberty than any of the other names out there. So, well, yeah, I don't agree with everything he says. I think, he's kind of, I wouldn't want to work for him, but I think the idea that this trendiness festers in the liberty movement about, oh, we got to like poo Alex Jones because he makes us all look bad. No, Alex Jones, if he makes anyone look bad, he makes himself look bad. There's another thing that I'm annoyed with is this collectivism. Oh, we have to kind of disassociate ourselves from people who say things we don't agree with because, oh no, it'll make us look bad. Like, here's the deal: the people, the statists out there, they already don't like us for our ideas. It doesn't matter who we're affiliated with. I think there's a panic in the liberty movement about wanting to look extra credible to the people we actually don't like, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, yeah, without Alex Jones, I don't know how long it would have taken for me. And it's funny you mentioned Ron Paul. I wasn't that influenced by him, although it's really amazing how a politician can turn so many people into anarchists and voluntarists. That is fascinating to me. And I think recently there was a video of Ron Paul where he publicly supported the idea of voluntarism, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah, I've seen that. He said to be an anarchist is a great thing, basically. And it's, again, I have my issues with the term anarchist, but I think he's completely right. I think he's he's obviously a voluntarist or at heart. He just has to. His shtick as a politician, he had to say certain things, certain keywords. But I think his Ron Paul's what his goal was always outreach. I think he was always trying to speak truth to power. And I think what inspired me about him was seeing him in the House of Representatives, basically calling everyone, all of the politicians out there on their bullshit. And I loved it. I think he was, I think we need someone like that up here in Canada. I'm kind of trying to work to get that to happen. But yeah, I think that's what brought me to liberty, was seeing him kind of truthfully speak to the corrupt hordes of Congress and call them all out to their face, and that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and at the same time, I kind of shudder to think that if somebody like Ron Paul or even like Adam Kokesh, who said he's going to run for president, when is it, 2016 or something?
2020, I think that was it.
2020.
He was going to run on Kokesh was saying he wants to run on the platform of dissolving the federal government, which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean, it is great. But then I think, if he actually did get elected, I would fear for his life, because it's just a massive Leviathan. And I don't know, to think that somebody can just go in there and then just, nonchalantly just dissolve each one of the agencies. And I don't think that would be so readily accepted by those people, working those agencies or the people in Congress.
Of course not. But the thing is, what's the alternative? Are we going to go? I don't think agorism is going to save anything. I think, you actually think that that you just going away and ignoring the government, they're just going to leave you alone, really?
Yeah, that's it's true. There's one sector of the population, of the volunteers population, that's more into the black markets, the gray markets, and agorism, and trading, and that's, I think, from my perspective, like, I have my website is Peaceful Anarchism, right? So I'm always addressing the peaceful, non-cooperation, non-association with the federal government. And if you look at the government as a leech, as a parasite that must siphon off the productivity of the industrious, when we do in large numbers withdraw our funding and support and participation in the parasitical government, then seems to me that over time that will weaken it.
You might weaken it to a point, but think of it this way. If you do that, say, and all these people start being agorists, and it gets to the point where the government isn't making enough money, or it's hitting them in the wallet, you don't think they're going to ramp up efforts to go after people who are avoiding them? Sure, that they'll go over the people who are probably the best targets, people who make the most money and such, but I think that it'll just basically, because if you've still got statists in power, they're still going to use the state for what it is, and that's a hammer. They're still going to try and bang as many heads as they can, and it might work. I don't think it would, because like I said, I think if they see you as a threat, they're going to come after you. They've got the U.S. government is the most heavily armed government in the history of man that I know of anyway, that and you don't think they're going to use that force against people. They'll call you terrorists, they'll call you this, they'll call you that. That's why I think, unless you're like planning an armed insurrection against the state, you need people in there so they at very least won't turn their guns on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the most important people that we can reach, in terms of the philosophy, is the police officers and the soldiers, right? The military, the order followers. Those are the people that without them, they provide the teeth and the force behind the mandates and edicts, right? And so basically, they are the power. So without them, they're powerless. And
well, it's interesting. I've seen I had a book called The Logic of Life. I can't remember what I can't remember for the life of me what I did with it, but it talked about in it the only successful revolutions are and I think they're talking violent revolutions, but I think the rule can still be applied, are ones that have the military or some sort of military backing. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think if you're actually serious about bringing down the state, I think, in our lifetime, I think you're going to have to get some sort of at least a few top brass in the military, because it seems to me, and I've never worked in the military, so I don't know. I could be talking out my ass here, but it seems to me that they basically, the soldiers will follow the orders of the guys they respect, right? So if you got a guy on top, like a general or someone who you can convince with our ideas, that would be the way to turn the soldiers get the soldiers to not fire on people, right? So that's what I think. Yeah, I think you need at least, if your goal is to bring down the state, you need to have at least at some level military support.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of these methods are useful, right? So you have the agorist, you have the person who actively tries to, talk to and educate the police and the military, and then you have the people that actually try to infiltrate, the government itself. Though, all the people are approaching it from different angles, and
I agree with you, and I think that I've had that point of view for a while now. But my problem is these kind of armchair ANCAPs who are like, "Oh my God, you're interacting with the state. You're legitimizing it." I don't have much patience for that, because most of them, I don't think agorism alone is the answer. So I think that, like you said, I think liberty is a war that needs to be fought on numerous fronts, and the political arena, as frustrating as it can be, I think is somewhat necessary, because the political arena is where people go to listen to ideas. Like, you and I can have a blog or podcast, and it's hard to get a lot of viewers. The fact of the matter is, but when you have a politician who's a good speaker, who can espouse the principles of liberty, they're going to get more attention, just because that's where the spotlight is. That's the platform. So to me, political action isn't so much about winning as much, although I do think it's necessary to have a few people in, but in order for that to even happen, you have to have a platform, an audience. So first and foremost, I think the political arena is somewhere you can go, it's somewhere we need to go to get ears if we're going to win hearts and minds.
Yeah, quite right. And I know there are a lot of people that are rail against people that do interact with the state, but it's true. It's just a different strategy. It's not my preferred. That's not what I'm cut out for. But we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? So why don't we talk about your documentary? How that came about and what it's about.
Well, my film, Hidden Influence, the first one being, well, first of all, Hidden Influence is a film series, the first chapter installment being The Rise of Collectivism. Now, in The Rise of Collectivism, I document how the power elite, through their tax-exempt foundations, have helped fund collectivist and authoritarian ideologies. For instance, in their tax-exempt foundations, like the Rockefeller Foundation, they funded numerous initiatives in education to promote socialism, right? I've got quotes from socialists in the from the UK, who were looking at initiatives that were put forth by organizations like the Progressive Education Association and the National Education Association, and how they were funded by the Carnegie Corporation, and how they were basically the guy says, I think Harold Lasky says it's a program for socialist America, and it was funded by the Carnegie Corporation. It was also, I think it was, who organized it? Like I said, I'm pretty sure it was the National Education Association, which itself got funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, funded the Rockefeller Foundation, General Education Board. So there's a lot of connections and stuff, but basically the gist of it is the ruling class has been funding authoritarian collectivist ideologies through the education system. Fast forward today, I hit on the social justice activism or social justice activism in the education system. They're teaching kids that their identity basically determines their lot in life, that social mobility, that personal agency doesn't exist, and that your life is predetermined by your identity, as your gender, your race, your sexual orientation, that kind of thing. So, basically, my point of view is that the rise of statism, the rise of collectivism, was been funded and facilitated by the power elite through their tax-exempt foundations.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So you're starting basically setting the ground and explaining how we came to be the way we are today. Is it?
To a certain extent, yeah, a lot of it. Like if you take the social, and it's all like Marxism and stuff. Well, they also funded fascism, but it's a false dichotomy to create up fascism versus communism. You have to buy into one of the sides. But specifically, what I talk about in the last part of my film is cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism was based on the translation of Marx's economic theory to the area of culture. It's all. If you look in the university, say that social justice degrees, and it's ridiculous. It's anti-white male propaganda, and I don't know how to mince the words, but it's basically what it is. It's saying that all the problems these people have, that all the problems in the world are caused by basically white people. That's the translation of Marx's economic theory to the area of culture, because basically they were the people who came up with this stuff, the Frankfurt School. They wanted to know why Marx's theories didn't come true. Basically, they thought Marx said if there was ever a mass war in Europe, that the ruling class would rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie government, and there'd be a Marxist utopia. Well, that didn't happen, and they wanted to know why. So, after studying, they basically come to the conclusion that it was because of Western civilization and the inherent corruption of capitalism and blinding the proletariat to their true class interests. So the whole goal of cultural Marxism is to destroy Western society and to foment a Marxist revolution. That's why I see the adoption of these ideas into the liberty movement as completely toxic. How is it going to help the adoption of capitalism if you're bringing into it an ideology that was created to try and destroy capitalism? I think there's some nonsense. The Center for the Stateless Society, one of those guys they called Murray Rothbard a revolutionary socialist. No, he wasn't. Murray Rothbard was a capitalist. He coined the term anarcho-capitalism. It's just a way for them to try and twist their ideas to try and bring about, I don't know, I don't think they see reality clearly. At least I think, because honestly, I think pretty much everyone, except for the people funding this stuff at the very top, they're all true believers, right? But I think they're completely blinded by a twisted ideology, and I don't think it has a place in the liberty movement.
So are those people what you're referring to? They call themselves the Anarcho-Communists?
Well, no, there's left libertarians. There's ANCOMs, Anarcho-Communists. They're part of this. They totally buy into the cultural Marxist ideas too. But there's people supposedly on our side who are trying to bring left libertarians basically trying to bring these ideas into libertarianism. So we need to be more sensitive or about these ideas so we can bring more people in. Basically, they're trying to sell it as a way to bring more people into the movement, because apparently I've heard that the liberty movement is predominantly a white male movement, and somehow that's bad. We need more diversity.
Gotta legislate the diversity.
But yeah, so they bring in these ideas under the cloak of saying, well, we need more diversity. We need to bring more people in. But I'm sorry, but these ideas are an antithesis to liberty. They're basically saying that, number one, whitey's bad. Everything in the world is white people's fault because we've got this magical privilege. And also it allows for, put it this way, if you take this ideology, because they believe that capitalism is inherently oppressive, systemic corruption, or excuse me, systemic oppression is the term I hear the left use a lot. So if you believe that Western society is inherently oppressive, then why wouldn't you say that, advocate the use of force against the people who are doing the oppressing? If someone's being oppressed, why wouldn't they use force against their oppressor? And you can say, well, it's just the it's the system. It's not white people. We'll say that. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're not completely racist, and that they just think that it's systemic, and that white people that white people are beneficiaries of privilege by the system. Well, that in of itself gives the justification for the marginalization of a group, of us as a group. And I'm sorry, I'm not willing to be the new marginalized group because history. It's just I'm not cool with it. I don't want anyone else to be oppressed. I don't want me to be oppressed. So I think the whole idea is completely and utterly toxic. I think it's disempowering, and I don't think it has a place in a community of people who want liberty.
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, you see that all the time, like in the State of the Union address. How they try to pit the rich against the poor, or the black against the white, or the workers against the employers, and in this way also the illegal immigrants, against the citizens, right? And it's pretty nasty. How that kind of continuous strife between the people can distract us from who's really doing the oppressing, who's really passing the violent edicts and mandates.
Well, the thing about left libertarians is I suspect that there comes times when their libertarianism comes in conflict with their leftism, or their cultural Marxism, their PC values. And I think if they had to choose between their libertarianism and their political correctness and their cultural Marxism, whatever term you want to use, their leftism, I think their leftism will win out over their libertarianism, because they view the world, even though they say they believe in Austrian economic theory, they view the world in a very flawed way, that just everything is oppression. Everything is, the certain groups are oppressed by other groups, and that needs to be changed. So their very ideology is based on another form of collectivism. And I'm just really getting annoyed seeing this in the movement. Like, really, like, how many more times do I have to put up with the word? If I have to see the word privilege one more time today, I'm probably going to pull my hair out. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I read there was a post about the minimum wage, and one person said, I'm a voluntarist, and I don't think we should have a state, but while we do have a state, we should have minimum wage, because it helps the poor.
Well, it doesn't help the poor. It doesn't help the people who need it the most.
Exactly.
All it does is make it harder. And it's so hard to explain this, even to smart people I know. I have a hard time explaining this. People who aren't who pretty much have a head on their shoulders and who aren't into this whole race baiting crap. The whole idea of minimum wage. Like, think about it. If you've only got a third of your profit, say, you bring in X amount of money a month, and you can only a third of it you've got to spend on wages, you're going to just not be able to. If you have a high minimum wage, you're just not going to be able to employ that many people, and it's going to be hard for the people who don't have skills to get work. To get some entry level job. It's not rocket science. It's really, really basic economics.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember Christopher Cantwell was talking about how as an entrepreneur, he's basically making less than minimum wage, right? He's paying himself less than minimum wage.
Yeah.
But if he has an employee, that would be illegal. He wouldn't pay that. He's like, so it's okay if I oppress myself, right? But I can't do it to somebody else. That would make me a criminal, right?
No, it's interesting, and it's interesting to see how this cultural Marxist agenda, this leftist agenda, is implemented in society. Because I went to I live in Vancouver Island now, and I went to it was a talk put on by the Green Party, or at least the leader of the Green Party was speaking, and there was a couple other people who were speaking, and they openly said to implement their agenda, they would have to go in, and basically they openly talked about how they have to work through numerous political parties, through various any social movements they could basically get into. They didn't use the word infiltrate, but that's basically what they were talking about. And then what else? Infiltrate. Oh yeah, and they also talked about infiltrating religious groups and and gave them the specific Bible quotes that they could use to kind of bring them on board. So basically, they're talking about, and these people are leftists. They have nothing in common with they have nothing but disrespect for religious people. So, specifically Christians. So it's really interesting to see them do that. People can laugh and say, "Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist," blah blah blah. They openly talk about how they want to infiltrate other social movements to inject their agenda. Now, the environment, if you look sustainability and social justice, you'll see that there's a whole academic discipline about talking about how to bring social justice into sustainable development. These are people who are working at big universities here in Canada, UBC, UVic. The thing is with the left, they actively do work through other social movements to implement their agenda. I think Saul Alinsky talked about it. He said, organize the organized. Go in there, bring them in, and make friends, use nonviolent communication, make friends, and then implement your agenda. So this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is people working to implement an ideological agenda. It's really no different, no different from what I'm trying to do by creating, liberty in my lifetime. But the only difference is they're a lot more organized and they're a lot more sneaky about it. I'm pretty open. We're pretty open. Libertarians are pretty open about our ideas. These people are more sneaky. They'll go and oh yeah, we I'm your friend. Let's work together. I work with you on this, and then they work to change your mind on that, and the other, and it works on weak-minded people. This is how they've been able to get their agenda forward. But it's interesting because they wouldn't have the ability to do this without the millions and millions of dollars they get from these tax-exempt foundations. Like another one I mentioned in the film was the Moody School of Communication. It's in Texas. They host feminist bloggers who talk about who use the terms. What was the term she used? For the flagrancy of such unchecked capitalism. Well, the chick doesn't know what capitalism is. All she knows is how to make a edgy sounding blog that'll rile up her lefty base. But yeah, they got $50 million from the Moody Foundation in Texas to update their building and stuff. And and the people who, there's a whole social justice, basically the department head or the assistant professor of journalism is also she's a feminist, who also works with the Social Justice Institute in the college. So they're working at these universities. They indoctrinate people into this ideology. In Canada, some schools have a social justice class Well, I interviewed a lady for my film who was in that social justice class, and basically they take you in a room and they divide you like, if you're one side if you're white, one side if you're not white. Oh, you white people, you're privileged. You other people, you're not privileged. These people have privilege over you. Do that with your gender, sexual orientation, anything. And they always try and tell it's all about dividing and putting and labeling one group as privileged and one group as not privileged. And then that's public school. And actually, last I heard, they were working to make the social justice class mandatory in the schools in British Columbia. But and then they continued that in the education class. I remember there's one college, I think it was Gonzaga, in the United States, one university where if you wanted an arts or science degree, you had to take a social justice class. It was mandatory because it was made mandatory by the dean of arts. So this guy or gal, whichever, has a specific agenda he's trying to indoctrinate kids in. So it's actually absolutely revolting, and I see it infesting every aspect of society, including the liberty movement, and it honestly, it makes me sick.
Yeah, wow, that's really amazing. I didn't know about that in the universities. Yeah, the first thing that I think is helpful when we're debating with statists is a basic clarification of terms. Because if you don't have a proper definition, how can you progress from there? Right?
Well, exactly. A lot of times they don't want to define their terms because they want to be all loosey-goosey so they can rope you in with nice-sounding rhetoric.
Yeah,
and it's not just like, because the funny thing is a lot of these people call themselves anarchists, and that's why I try and steer away from the term, because they call themselves anarchists, we call themselves anarchists. It muddies the waters. I think I pretty much stick to the term libertarian or anti-statist, although yes, or anarcho-capitalist, because like I said, I'm a firm believer that capitalism works. Free, laissez-faire capitalism works and is basically the only driver of wealth and prosperity in our world. And these people, they're communists, they're collectivists. They don't believe in the right of the individual. They don't believe in self-ownership. They think that the community should have a say on how you order your life, how you live your life. They would never. It's interesting. Try and get an ANCOM to coherently discuss how their society would work. Mm-hmm. They don't. All they say is, the community will come together. They're all wavy gravy types who don't really have a clear answer for anything in my conversations with them.
Yeah, I mean, I like those terms, anarcho-capitalist, and I also like voluntarists, because not many people.
I've met leftists that call themselves voluntarists.
Really? Are you serious?
I am.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so I that's why I like the term, like I said, libertarian, and I'm fighting to keep it. They're trying to take it, they're trying to, because originally, the original term libertarian did come from the left, but we basically took it because they took our term liberal. So we took libertarian back from them, but I'm really struggling to fight for the term libertarian and not let it be co-opted by the left again. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really anarchist. I think is one that's lost. Honestly, you can use it if you like, but I think the term is lost to the enemy.
Yeah, usually when I talk to people, when I go to places like the grocery store, the bank, or wherever I am, walking down the street or in the library, and I get into these conversations, I never mention the word anarchist, right? But I just talk about economics, and I talk about the illegitimacy of government and law and things like that, and people understand that, and because once you call yourself an anarchist or something, they might start immediately to get defensive, right? So those labels can be counterproductive when you're speaking to just regular people on the street. That's kind of what I find.
Fair enough, but as some people, they don't like the term labels because it I don't understand that. Don't label me, man. Well, no, a label means the reason you label something is so you can categorize it and define it, right? Mm-hmm. And I fair enough, it might not be best to even use any names or labels when you're talking to certain people. But I think the idea that somehow labels aren't helpful, I don't buy into that type of thinking.
So when you talk to people, like when you're on the street and everything, how do you approach the subjects? Do you try to spark up a conversation on these things with people? Like
Sometimes it depends on the situation. I've been at this a while now, so my I guess patience for the average person is somewhat thin these days. So honestly, I try to let my content do the talking for me. I think that way I can put out a well planned out, well thought out debate. And I don't know, like I said, I don't generally, like, honestly, I'm a pretty busy guy. I don't generally strike up too many conversations with people I don't know. I'm busy. Yeah, I don't generally talk to too many people just at the line of the bank or whatever. Might make the odd discussion or conversation with someone, but generally I find the average person doesn't have a long enough attention span to see out the conversation, or they get just overly emotional because you're stepping on their sacred cows. So either way, it makes it hard to actually have the conversation and show them that these ideas are beneficial. So yeah.
So given the fact that you're in politics and you're trying to spread these ideas through the political arena, what are your views on voting?
Vote if there's someone who represents your point of view. I don't see why not.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the last time I voted was in 2008 for Obama. That's the last time. And basically, the only reason I did vote for Obama was because my family is mostly composed of Democrats. So that was just the person I was going to vote for. I didn't really care about politics, for most of my life, but until recently, I really, as I started to understand them, it seems to me that politics is something that, for most people, it's just too obtuse and confusing and dense for them to understand, and so most people just like shrug it off, like just let the experts deal with all the economy and the interest rates. I don't have time to worry about that stuff, and so most people don't put in the time, I think, and effort to understand all these things, except when you really are presented with a coherent way to understand it, like as in through Austrian economic theory and anarcho-capitalism. Then it becomes clear, and then you really, as in my case anyway, have more of a desire to want to become active. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, well, I think there's just going to be some people who it just goes over their head and they're not interested. There's a guy, your next door neighbor, whoever. There's some guy that's just going to be the guy mowing his lawn, doing his thing, regardless of if it's a communist society, he'll still be there mowing his lawn, doing his thing. Or if it's a anarcho-capitalist society, he's still there mowing his lawn, doing his thing. I think generally change is made by a dedicated minority. I don't think the general population, I don't even think they care that much unless they, as long as they have a full belly and a roof over their heads.
Oh yeah, quite right. Yeah, there's definitely the.
And then the bread and circus too. That's why we've got so many pretty distractions. The internet. Well, the internet's a good thing, but also can be just a time killer. And you got the entertainment industry. So I think as long as people they're fed, they're clothed, they have a roof over their heads, and they're somewhat entertained, I think they're just happy.
Yeah, exactly. I think I remember a statistic that if the inflation rate goes like above 40%, then that's usually when revolutions occur. Because
I could see that. I heard a figure that's often quoted to me that you need 10%. Once 10% of a population accepts an unshakable idea, society changes. Well, that being the case, we need to be very careful about how we as libertarians, liberty-minded people, spread the message of liberty. I don't think, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think attaching ideologies that were created to destabilize Western society and destroy capitalism are helpful in creating an anarcho-capitalist society.
I don't even think that if people really wanted to destroy capitalism, like I don't really think that could even happen because you always have black markets, right? Whenever you have systems of oppression and domination, laws and things like that, there's always going to be people who are going to be trading, voluntarily but illegally, all right, under the current regime. There's just no way you can stamp that out, right?
I think you're right. Example of this was in the Soviet system. Basically, there were so few tradesmen that even, yeah, sure, you didn't have to pay them to come to your house, but they wouldn't even walk in the door unless you prepared them a lavish meal. So, that's right. You're right about that. There will always be trading in markets, but the thing is, after the Spanish, these communists, these whatever, I call them authoritarian collectivists, they will try their damnedest. An example of this is when some quote-unquote anarchists, anarcho-communists, or syndicalists, whichever variety they were, took over a geographical area in Spain during the Spanish Civil War in the early 20th century. They killed thousands. They killed something like 5,000 people, and some of them weren't even, just for having the wrong political ideology. And here's the thing, they banned the use of money by pain of death. So, like I said, the far left is incredibly authoritarian, and it doesn't have any place within libertarian thought. And it frustrates me because I see this ideology really gaining ground all over, but a lot in Canada.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, when I think back to my government schooling, the biggest, symbol of evil was Hitler, right? And the Holocaust, right? He killed, 6 million Jews and maybe in total 10 million people died under him. Whereas what happened with, Stalin and Mao, you didn't really hear much about them.
It's because they were allies, but I think something like 80 million were killed under the communist Chinese regime. Yeah. But the interesting thing about Hitler, the Nazis, they were National Socialists. I seen some quotes posted recently from Hitler proving that he was a socialist. He's like, how could you not be? He's against, basically, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of, he was against the accumulation of capital, and that's why he was against Jews. And this quote I do remember, and it was translated from German, so I don't know if the translation is perfect, but basically it said, I don't see how one can be a socialist and not be anti-Semitic. So he was a proud socialist. It's funny that the far left tries to distance themselves from him right now, but there's not, as far as I'm concerned, there's not a damn lick of difference between communism and socialism. I mean, there's some superficial differences. Yes, the government, there's some monolithic corporations under fascism who own the factories instead of the government owning them outright. But that's a very small distinction when you see the fact that these corporations and government work hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. When you bring up what happened in China, in Red China and Soviet Russia, that's not what people understand as in history. Like a lot of people proudly call themselves communists. We're doing it for the community, right?
Well, see, they don't use it. They don't use the term communist anymore because if you use the term communist, they'll say you're red baiting. But the fact is, these people do believe in authoritarian ideologies. They're either Marxists, Leninists, Stalinists. Yeah. They're anarcho-communists, ANCOMs, or anarcho-syndicalists, which is basically the same thing. I think there's a few minute differences between anarcho-communists and anarcho-syndicalists, but basically they want the same thing. These ideologies, these far left-wing ideologies, they're collectivist and they're authoritarian in nature.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. It's like there's just two basic ways you can interact with your fellow man, is right, just by voluntary means or by coercion or force, right? And it doesn't. Go ahead.
The thing about their ideology is, they think that say if I were to hire you to mow my grass or do something for me, if I were to hire you, I would be exploiting your labor because I'm not giving you the full benefit of it, right? If you make widgets for me and pay you $10 an hour, but from making those widgets, I sell what you make for like $50 per every hour you make it, right? They say that's exploitation. You should be getting the full benefit of your labor. But the thing is, they don't recognize the risk that the capitalist has by investing his money. He could lose. The capitalist who invests everything who invests the money could lose everything. Also, they don't understand the deference of gratification and underconsumption that one must do to create capital. If I'm working, and the only way I can keep my money is the only way I can save money is if I underconsume what I'm capable of. So I have to underconsume. I have to be disciplined, underconsume, so I can save up this nest egg, so I can invest it and maybe make more money from it. Right? To be a capitalist, to be a business owner, it requires discipline and it requires deferral of gratification. Now, I don't, from what I know of most ANCOMs, these are not traits they are very familiar with.
Deferral of gratification. Yeah, I like that. I don't often use that phrase, but yeah, it's quite right. That's you got finite resources, right, and infinite desires, right, and so in that sort of society, we need to have a system. People say that capitalism. What do they say? Capitalism is based on infinite, never-ending consumption, something like that, in a finite world, right? Is that what they say?
Yeah, infinite consumption in a finite world.
yeah, right. But capitalism. The way I describe capitalism to people is like, I have $5 and you have a sandwich and we trade. I want the sandwich more than my $5. You want my $5 more than the sandwich. And is there a victim, right, in that situation? Has anyone lost, right? Has anyone suffered?
The way I describe capitalism is it is the voluntary exchange between goods and services between two consenting individuals, usually using an agreed upon medium of exchange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always win-win, right? Capitalism is always win-win. It's always voluntary, and if there is force applied, then it's not true capitalism. So it's basically, to me, the difference between lovemaking and rape.
Obviously, it's corporatism versus or fascism versus voluntary interaction. But yeah, I think when you start to get into these hardcore kind of race baiting, sex baiting ideologies, you have a problem because it focuses the problem on a specific group. Like you people are privileged. You've got something. I'm not doing good because you, and it makes it really easy for them to basically, justify violence and marginalization of a specific group because I've got problems, because exploitation. Really, I think these social justice warriors are the moral equivalent to Hitler.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of Larkin Rose's video. What's the difference between Nazi Germany and the federal government as it stands today? and I like to put that, to challenge some statists when I talk to them, because what is the difference? There really is no difference, and every tyrant and dictator and despot that has come to power never came to power on the platform of I will murder millions of people, right? It's always been I'm the savior. I'm going to lift us out of poverty. We're going to be the marvel of the world,
Well, it's interesting because you've got all these people in the defense, just all over the government, but specifically in the United States, Department of Homeland Security, Justice Department. They've all gone through these universities that promote these agendas. Now, something that your viewers might find interesting: the modern feminist movement. Number one, it wouldn't have happened they admit, a feminist scholar, Miriam Chamberlain, actually quoted in a report I quote from in my film about how basically foundations like the Ford Foundation, specifically the Ford Foundation, but also the Rockefeller Foundation, were instrumental in the institutionalization of women's studies, which is basically feminist courses, right? Of women's studies. So without these foundations, these ideologies would not have a foothold in Western society. I also included a clip from a lecture from a feminist scholar. I think it was from the University of British Columbia. She openly talked about how the first feminists, or the first, I think these were second wave feminists, because the first feminists were just suffragettes who wanted to vote and own property like their peers, right? They were rich women who were mad that they couldn't own property and vote like their brothers and fathers, which is fair enough. But the second wave, this is where feminism and Marxism really became intertwined, because after the institutionalization of it through the big foundations, these feminist scholars started to critique existing Marxist critiques of capitalism, but saying they were insufficient because they didn't include a women's perspective. So what they did is they tweaked and they modified and worked within these same Marxist theories, critiquing them, right? Tweaking within them. So what we have in feminism today, what modern feminism really is, it's a fusion between it's cultural. It really is cultural Marxism, because it's a tweaked version of Marxist theories to paint women as the proletariat. And the in this clip I used in my film, she actually talks about how patriarchy, how the feminists basically found that patriarchy was a blueprint that capitalism was a blueprint for exploitation. I think the term was that the ruling class used for. It was a blueprint for exploitation that capitalism built upon. So they view, and then for those who don't know what patriarchy is the feminist conspiracy theory that all of society is set up to disenfranchise women and to build up men. So yeah, that is the view of these college university professors that are teaching people and indoctrinating students into this ideology.
You know, if the damn patriarchy is true, you know, it's doing a terrible job, because, you know, like 80% of the inmates in prisons are male, and how many you know, men are being, you know, torn, like, you know, their very lifeblood is being ripped through their wallets through, you know, alimony and divorce settlements and things like that.
Then of course there's, I think, 90% of the victims of assaults and not rape, but assaults and murders are men. And well, I think rape is probably half and half if you include the people in jail. Yeah. So it probably is more, actually, but I'm just being conservative. But no, so this ideology that is being promoted as feminism is really just a fusion of you know, various Marxist theories. It's quite insane. And so, you know, when anyone says that they're a feminist, this is the idea they believe. So yeah. So according to them, patriarchy and capitalism are twin systems of exploitation, with patriarchy being the first system, which capitalism used as a blueprint for exploitation. So these are the ideas that are seeping their way into our movement, and people don't get it. It's honestly, they don't get it because they haven't spent the time trying to understand these ideologies. But if you look at them, you see that it's all poison.
What we need is a woman in power as a president. That's what's going to solve our problems, right? Yeah, thank you very much for the conversation. So why don't you let people know where they can find your work?
Oh yeah, my website is libertymachinenews.com. My YouTube is Death Metal Patriot, or just find it Richard Heathen. I started when I was more of a minarchist type, so the URL is Death Metal Patriot. But yeah, so that's where you can find me on my website and my YouTube. And stay tuned, because the Rise of Collectivism is just this close to being out. We just have to fix a few audio issues, and it'll be out. So I'm hoping to have the DVDs burned within a week. And after that, they'll be available on my website, and I'm hoping everyone will pick one up, support the work I do. Eventually, it'll go on YouTube, but I don't know when. We'll also be doing digital downloads. I'm probably put on YouTube in like a month or two. But yeah, right now, just buy the DVDs, get the digital download, support me, help me with my second film, which will be going into how the social justice movement is working within the environmental movement to implement its agenda. Also, another thing, just a quick fact I kind of wanted to touch on that I never got to. You've got these people who are the major environmental activists in the here in Canada. They're all funded by U.S. foundations, and they're all social justice advocates. And they're getting there's all these NGOs and far left-wing activists working within the government, working hand in hand with the government. A lot of them get American Foundation millions and millions of dollars. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, along with the Sierra Club, has worked to fund the anti-oil sands campaign to a tune of $7 million a year, and that's just one campaign. Anyways, I'll let you go, and thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. It was good talking to you.
Thank you very much. So this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network and the Conscious Resistance Network. Wishing all of you have a wonderful day. Take care.